Hello there, this is the first part of the Understanding Anger brief, which I intend to do in two parts. And again, this is a brief which we normally do in a seminar format lasting a whole morning. So I'm going to try and get it into a fairly short space of time so that everybody can view this. Okay then, Understanding Anger. First of all, a quote from Aristotle. Anyone can become angry. That is easy. But to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, and in the right way, that is not easy. And in a sense, that encapsulates human maturing, that all these instinctive ways of behaving which we inherit from our past, once we can gain conscious control of them, they can work for us. We can direct them with our will, with our intelligence. But insofar as we don't have conscious control of them, of course then we become a prey to them, and we become little more than an instinctive animal. But anyway, what's good about anger? And there are good things about it, because the ability to become angry, to have this response in our repertoire, has saved our lives many times throughout human history. Well, without anger or the ability to be assertive, and anger is part of that ability to be assertive. Without the ability to assert yourself, to deal with confrontation, to stand up for yourself, you wouldn't be able to get your dog off the furniture, for instance. You wouldn't be able to get your cat to shift. You wouldn't be able to stand up when somebody shortchanged you in a shop. So we need the ability to stand up for ourselves. But again, we need to use that in an appropriate fashion. So that element of this instinctive template is good. There are goods about it. So to be able to assert ourselves when appropriate, to be able to deal with confrontation. Otherwise we'd be a pushover and people would take advantage of us. So sometimes confrontational circumstances have to be dealt with. We have to be able to stand up for ourselves and for other people, of course. It's also part of the fight or flight response. So we see the fight part of the fight or flight response. And this is our crucial mechanism which has enabled us to deal with emergencies, again through our history, and which has saved our lives to such a degree that we wouldn't be here present and alive as a species today without the fight or flight response. So the opposite, of course, is anxiety and fear, which makes you want to get out of there. Anger makes you want to get stuck in. So anger could be said to be a go towards emotion. Anxiety and fear is a move away from emotion. So all emotions put us into motion. Anger is the go towards version of the fight or flight response. There are also psychological effects of anger, and it actually feels good. It feels empowering. It gives us the emotional energy to go forward and do something, as I've just described. And sometimes, if we didn't have a head of steam, we wouldn't be able to go and do the things we feel we need to do. So sometimes that emotion and being able to have access to it is what enables us to do something that needs doing. So it can feel good, and that's part of the physical arousal of anger, which we'll come on to later as well. So it's important that we don't lose the ability to become angry in appropriate measure, that we don't lose the ability to be able to do confrontation. But why is anger getting out of control? Now clearly at early stages of our life on this planet, when these things were less subject to conscious control, we were more instinctive sorts of creatures. But hopefully, most of the time, those instinctive templates would only come online appropriately when the right stimulus in the environment came along and made that happen. But now in polite society, you can't just be a stimulus response sort of creature. We've got to be a bit more sophisticated than that. But when we lack the tools to deal with the demands of modern society, we fall back on what we are, well, what nature has given us, what our genes have provided for us. If we can't do it in any other way, we fall back on the old ways. And one explanation for why anger gets out of control sometimes is that people simply lack emotional intelligence, or EI. And when you lack emotional intelligence, you can't deal effectively with what's in front of you. You lack the ability to moderate emotions and to bring rational thought into play. And so with a lack of emotional intelligence and a lack of an ability to deal with things which are too complicated and sophisticated, we fall back on old instinctive ways of dealing, getting angry being one of those ways, a steamroller through it. And this leads on to the complexity of modern life, makes it difficult to get our essential psychological needs met in balance. Sometimes life is just too hard, it's too complicated, you can't get to the bottom of it, there's too much admin in the way of everything. And when we can't find a way through it, our emotional temperature starts to rise, and anger is one of the options. Of course, tears, anxiety would be one of the other options, but in this case we're dealing with anger. And the physical effects of anger are very important to understand. First of all, anger exists primarily for emergencies, and this is the heavy end of anger, when you're really raging. And this is what enables a mother rat, say, when it's cornered, protecting its young, to get stuck into a much bigger beast, because it would seem like an improbable chance of victory, and it would seem like an unfair fight, but in certain circumstances you just got to do it. And so getting the rage on is what enables animals to get stuck in when they really need to. And in the past we have been in exactly that sort of circumstance, cornered by the proverbial saber-toothed tiger when out doing your hunter-gathering. So it's part of the fight or flight response, and as a result a chemical cocktail are released into our systems when we are extremely angry to enable us to get into action and do stuff, to be put into this aggressive motion. And for that we get adrenaline, we get things like cortisol, testosterone levels in males of course rise, and you feel a sense of energy and warmth. You feel energized by this, you feel as if you want to move. In fact, you find it difficult to keep still because your limbs are being primed to move quickly and forcefully. That's the whole thing. So observing somebody who's getting angry, you might observe them clenching their fists, you might observe respiration getting faster, so they may be panting, they may go red in the face, and the whole thing is a bit of a rush. And interestingly, the arousal of anger is very close to the arousal of sexual arousal. It's a very similar sort of feeling in the body. So interestingly, anger can be quite addictive. People who are chronically angry people actually like being angry. So what it does to the body means that it's just nice, but it does stuff to the mind as well. It simplifies the thinking into black and white thinking. And again, we'll come on to that a little bit later. But this combination of physical arousal, of feeling empowered, of your thinking being simplified into black and white thinking, which means either you're right or you're wrong, and in this case you're right, is a really good feeling. So I'm right, everybody else is wrong, I feel good and I feel empowered. That's an addictive mix, which means that when people are challenged about their anger, they very often defend themselves. They make excuses for being angry. I'm the sort who calls a spade, and all this sort of thing. And it's good to get it off your chest, it wouldn't be good to hold it in. And you have all this silly nonsense coming back when people are trying to justify a form of behaviour that is wrecking relationships, bullying, whatever it is, and all the negative consequences of chronic anger. Anybody who's lived with an angry person knows what I'm talking about. But the angry person will defend themselves. They don't want to change because they often like the feeling of being angry. Is addictive. However, there's a cost. So chronic anger and health. When you're in that anger rush, blood pressure rises markedly. And again, because your blood is being pumped into the muscles, so you can spring into action. And if you are one of these people who's chronically nursing anger, you're always in a bit of a tiz, then you are keeping this thing on the boil. It's maybe at a low level, maybe at a moderate level of occasional high outbursts, but if you're doing it all the time, you're keeping this cocktail going, you're keeping your blood pressure up. And as a result, you're also suppressing your immune system. And this is all part of these chemicals being released into your body, that the chronic sort of end of it is that your immune system will be suppressed, you'll be more prone to picking up infections and germs and all sort of stuff. You also have slower recovery from illness. Heart efficiency decreases. Now this is a serious business because people who are chronically angry are at higher risk of heart attack. They don't recover so well from a first heart attack. After a first heart attack, they're more likely to get a second heart attack. Effectively, on almost every level of cardiovascular heart health, you're basically stuffed. So you're going to die young. So anger and being chronically angry is really seriously bad for your health. I can't overestimate that. If you actually look at the figures, it makes dire reading. Part of the reason for this is you've got higher cholesterol in your system, because when you're in the fight or flight response, remember, your body wants to put you into action. It's expecting a fight when you're angry, and for that you need energy. And the energy your body provides is in the form of fats or lipids being released into your bloodstream from where they're stored in your body. And so you've got this higher cholesterol. Cholesterol is a form of fat floating around in your bloodstream. But of course, unless you are getting stuck in every time and having a good scrap, you're not burning it off. And if you're keeping the anger simmering, you're keeping these levels high. So your high blood pressure, high cholesterol, suppressed immune system, lowered heart efficiency is a recipe for disaster. So what lowers the threshold for becoming angry? Why? Other circumstances we can identify that means people get to being angry quicker. So there's less emotional regulation going on. Well, first of all, if you're under the age of 25, the circuits in your brain which allow you to feed back and stop emotions in their tracks haven't finished evolving yet, especially in men. So younger people can't moderate emotions quite as well as older people. On the other end of the scale, dementia, because the brain is declining in its ability to function. So again, the ability to feed back and moderate emotion is often affected in dementia. Hormonal changes. Ladies, I'm talking to you, different times of life, but also boys going through puberty. For instance, anything which is changing the chemical balance of your body can lower your threshold for anger. Addictive cravings. This can be for alcohol, for illegal drugs, for nicotine. Anything you're addictive to or are used to getting regularly, your latest caffeine fix for instance, if you haven't been able to get it and it's making you a little bit ratty, that's eating into your emotional spare capacity, which means you're going to hit the limit quicker and you're going to tip over into anger. Illness, again, can eat into your emotional spare capacity. Poor diet, and especially lack of omega-3 oils. These are part of the raw constituents of our brain chemistry that enable us again to moderate our emotional life. So make sure you get a balanced diet with sufficiency of omega-3, which means plenty of oily fish, and if you're not getting oily fish, supplement with omega-3. Now there's a few myths about anger I'm just going to explore to end this part of the presentation. The first myth is that catharsis is good. So the old therapists would have you bashing each other with cushions to get it out of your system, or take it out on the punch bag, or shout it out in some way. But what you're doing when you do this is you're rehearsing being angry. And what we've discovered is people who rehearse anger don't get it out of the system, they actually become better at being angry. So of course you feel a little relief immediately because you've had some aerobic exercise and you sort of completed the anger template. You've got angry, you've acted it out, the template's been completed, and so for that moment you feel calm or calmer. But ultimately in the long run you've rehearsed the template, so you become better at it. So catharsis doesn't make you better in the long run, it makes you worse of this brief. And the myth that talking anger out gets rid of it. Well, talking anger out may appear to be a good idea, and people are always asking you, let's talk about it. Why don't you tell me what's on your mind? The trouble is the way we talk anger out is important, because if you're talking to a mate and telling him why you can't stand somebody, what we tend to do is to rehearse all the negative qualities in the person we don't like. And we rehearse in our minds the reasons why we get angry with them. And as a result of rehearsing that in our minds, we get better at it. And we find reasons and justifications for becoming angry in the future. So that way of talking it out, getting it off your chest, again, you may feel an immediate sense of relief, but in the long run, you are practicing the reasons for getting angry. The next myth is that children's tantrums are healthy. That, it's good if he doesn't hold it in, or she doesn't hold it in because you're doing some damage. It's better that they get it out. They're good at expressing their emotions. Well, let's turn that into adult life. And an adult who has tantrums when they can't get their own way. Teaching children that tantrums are okay is a contribution to ruining their future life. Because when they become adults, if they carry on doing it, they're not going to have a lot of friends. People are not going to want to spend time with them. But every time they need to get their own way, they just resort to anger as a way of making that happen for them. Children should be taught as early as possible that these sorts of behaviours are not acceptable and they will not be rewarded for them. The rewards will be withheld, attention will be withheld. The final myth is that suppressed anger causes depression. It used to be thought that if you didn't get it off your chest and express your anger, you turn it in on yourself and you'd make yourself depressed. Well, that is not true, I'm glad to say. So there's some myths of anger. Okay, that's the end of part 1 of this presentation, and I'll be back with part 2.